And we're live. Welcome everybody to our virtually connecting session at the Open Education Conference 2016. I'm Nadine Aboulmagd, your virtual co-buddy for this session, and our second virtual buddy is Helen DeWard. I'm going to leave her introduce herself in a little bit. We are connecting with Rajiv, Adam, Jennifer, Cindy, and Jameson on site. Dan. Hi, Dan. We're connecting with these guys that are going to tell us all about all about what's going on today. So I want people on site or folks on site to start introducing themselves first, and then we're going to go virtual for a quick round of introductions before we get started. Okay.
I'll start. Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm an instructional designer, very interested in digital citizenship and stuff. I work in Wisconsin.
I'm Daniel Lyons. I work in Wisconsin as well. I'm an instructional technologist, and I'm thinking of changing my handle to Lurker Guy in the Back. So nice to see you all.
My name is Jennifer Madrell, and I founded Designers for Learning. It's a nonprofit, and our focus is on open education for adult basic education. So for those who have not completed high school.
I'm Rajiv Jhangiani. I'm a psychology professor and open ed practices advocate based in Vancouver, BC.
My name is Adam Croom. I'm the Director of Digital Learning at the University of Oklahoma.
And I'm Jameson Miller. I'm a doctoral student at the College of William & Mary, just about an hour from where we are here in Richmond. And we'll be soon looking for a job. So I'll put on my biggest smile.
That's awesome. Good luck with that, Jameson. Okay, welcome everybody. Virtual folks, do you guys want to go ahead and start? Mandy?
Yeah, hi. I was in the UK. I was working at the OU and working at schools, and now I'm here. I'm building a house, and I'm also looking for work. And eventually, I'm going to have to stop building a house. But I'm keeping my hand in. I was at Open Ed last year, so I'm missing you being there this year.
Lindsay? Do you want to go
my name is Lindsay. I work in faculty development at University of Arizona, and I focus in online teaching and instructional technology, supporting instructors with those.
Morris?
Hi, I'm Mo Kosel. I'm at Austin College in Sherman, Texas, about an hour north of Dallas, and I'm a digital pedagogy designer there.
Awesome. Helen, do you want to go next?
I'm Helen DeWard. I work with the Faculty of Education in Central Ontario in Canada, and I work with digital technologies and media literacy.
Awesome. Thank you, Helen. Okay, let's get this party started. Why don't you guys tell us all about what's going on at the conference? How are your sessions? How are you excited? Tell us everything. Which sessions have you been in? Everything.
Everything.
Well, maybe it's worth mentioning that I think there's been a palpable change in tone at this year's conference from last year. I think last year, following the conference actually quite a bit, there was a series of blog posts that were rather spirited that sort of tried to poke the direction of the movement more towards pedagogy and away from perhaps an exclusive focus on textbooks and cost savings. Not that that's not important, but sort of broadening the focus. And my perception is over the first day and a half of the conference is that that message has been heeded very much so. I mean, right from the opening keynote through to many of the sessions that are talking very explicitly about pedagogy, questioning, even talking about advocacy in terms of not just cost savings, but in terms of pedagogical innovation. So that's been the most obvious change for me.
Yeah, I wrote a blog post right before. I did this last year where I pulled scraped all the abstracts of Open Ed and was looking at, how many of them mentioned OERs and how many of them mentioned textbooks. Mm-hmm. And the number of mentions of textbooks is up. And so, my thought was that this would be very textbook driven as well. I think for me with a change of tone, I mean, VCA has done like enormous work for moving forward the open textbook initiative. VCU and the All Lab and Gardner Campbell have given such a different perspective and flavor on what open means and even what online means, because they're more of a digital and kind of a blur type shop. And that came out at the beginning of the conference like really well. It set a good tone. And that's been encouraging to see, because I think that's seeped its way through the still, fairly explicit textbook conversation that's still had.
Yeah, I would echo that in my experience today. I'm doing 2 presentations at this conference, probably on opposite ends of the spectrum. One of mine was on textbook costs in Virginia, that I was actually execute that project. And the attendance at that session was very enthusiastic, the people that were there, but I only had maybe 15 people attend that one. Meanwhile, when I went to Vivian Rolfe's presentation, Critical Theory, and Roland Moe as well, those were highly attended, standing room only, packed. So I think that the interest seemingly is moving along these same lines.
Yeah, and I would hope that the way the conversation was framed this year and the way how interest, I don't want to say it's shifted, but it's certainly in multiple pockets. You hope that like next year there's a broader diversity of, as far as what actually, are the kind of proposed topics of discussion.
First year here, and so there was more textbook stuff than I thought would be here. And even I proposed something and got rejected. But even the proposal, looking at it for the first time, I wouldn't have thought that there wasn't anything that really jumped out at me and said, we're going to push open pedagogy this year, or things other than textbook in the actual proposal. So maybe that would be a change for next year. But at the same time, yes, I've been to a lot of sessions, and the ones that seem to be attended more, there was a great session today, the Sonar session about narrative research and storytelling, and where is that for education. So there was some virtual presenters, kind of, Bonnie and Dave Stewart, sorry. Bonnie Stewart, sorry, and then there were Kate Bowles, Laura Gogia, and Kristen Eshelman,
Amy Collier.
And Amy Collier. So it was a really great session talking about a lot of these issues, and definitely far, far away from resources. So.
Yeah, and to take that, I mean, for me, the main current, this is my first time as well, the main current that I've seen is there's only one session I've been to that wasn't directly about narrative of some type. So people sharing their stories. So I didn't know it was maybe spawned from a lot of people are now making this more of a, what is my practice and how do I think of open, or what is open to me in my context and stuff. So hearing people's stories is really all I've heard. I think there was only one session maybe that wasn't that. So.
In my perspective, my first conference I attended was in 2007, and we literally went to David Wiley's house for dinner one night. So as far as scale, that was the first thing really that struck me. I think you mentioned it's up 30% even over last year. Is that right, with the attendance? So it's very large now. And with that, here comes everybody. So things definitely change, but I'm going to take a very positive spin on that. When David was putting together the conference themes, I tweeted out, it would be great if we could see a theme for adult basic education. This conference is very well represented by higher ed, a smattering of K-12, and adult basic education really is the forgotten segment in education in general, and it had virtually no representation here at this conference. So again, shameless plug for us. We've got 2 sessions tomorrow, and we have oodles of people who are participating in some of our projects that are here. So that's very exciting. Big change from the past.
So maybe I'll just add a couple of things. One of the sessions, so I'm a little bit like you, Jameson, where I'm trying to sort of straddle a broader spectrum. So a couple of the presentations have been about research, but in that, even within the research, trying to broaden it by talking about both quantitative and qualitative research, which I don't think happens enough at this conference. But on the other hand, in about an hour or so, Robin DeRosa, of course, who's part of our VC team, and I are talking about open pedagogy very explicitly, and we're talking about free and freedom and trying to make a case. And I think we're going to try and push, the people, well, probably going to come up against people's comfort level in terms of what we're pushing for, the broadening of the focus of the movement. So, for example, the amount of lip service we give to freedom. We focus on free, but we don't focus on freedom. And same thing with student-centered, where we all have student-centered in our mission statements at our universities, but we're not letting our students participate in the construction of course content or syllabi or policies or anything else. So what's student-centered? So there's that. But I want to say is, as we're seeing the broadening of the focus, hopefully, and including to look at additional areas like ABE, I think one area that's desperately still lacking, and I feel this perhaps more because maybe I'm a little bit more self-conscious that in some cases I wonder, have so many of my proposals been accepted, perhaps because I stand out a little bit in terms of my diversity quotient. Yes. I mean, again, as privilege is a funny thing, and as a university professor, I'm already fairly privileged, so I'm not that diverse in that sense. But, I think one of my great concerns, and something I hope that we do a better job of moving forward, is if we keep talking about serving populations that are underserved, those voices are not represented in most of the discussions at this conference. I think that's something I would like to see.
Yeah, that's exactly one of the things that I was going to specifically to ask about, was that last year I noticed that there were very few presentations about anything that was going on anywhere else in the world other than in the USA. And so I was wondering if you felt like that had maybe changed a little as well or not.
Not that
That
I've
was a yes.
noticed.
That was a yes/no conversation, wasn't it?
Yes.
Like I said, most of the sessions I've attended have either been higher ed driven. Again, this compare and contrast to somebody else mentioned open versus commercial. You hear that a lot. And I just attended, to me, a very refreshing session. When I first got into this movement, was this whole idea that we were contributing openly to a commons. And whatever you're doing, the cool part of it is that you show some type of network currency and others share with you. And I don't know, it could just be the randomness of how I picked my sessions. I really have not felt that kumbaya-ness in a lot of sessions. It's more like, how can we compete with, as others have mentioned, commercial offerings in any way, shape, or form.
I was going to say, Viv, talked about it a little bit. Not that it was necessarily a discussion about the impact across the world, but I think she also highlighted how much this is a bit of a closed box, and she shared these maps about who's doing the research in open ed and who are they citing, and how we're sort of citing each other within this echo chamber. And she pointed to some of the work of Laura Chernovich, for example, which was great. The only other session that I attended that kind of touched on a more international perspective, I think, was Mark Singer's, where he was talking about the OERU, the OER Universitas, and the work of this global consortium in really trying to work with universities in Africa, in the Global South, and other places as well, to try and create student-centered, flexible, accessible open ed that's credit-bearing. But I haven't seen a whole lot otherwise.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in with a very practical kind of session, if I may. Mandy, did you want to say something? Okay. I just, when I read a lot of your abstracts and I was just thinking about all these things open, I was just wondering about what do you think the main components that A, an institution needs to have, and B, faculty needs to adopt, basically, to try and be ready for adopting the openness in their pedagogy generally as an institution and as faculty in their own classes?
So I would say time. I think people at institutions see this as an initiative, that we're going to adopt a specific percentage, or they'll start to put metrics to it. And I've much more seen over time that open is an evolution, and there are multiple pathways into it, and it's something that evolves over time. And I don't know if institutions are really building in that long of a reflection period on things that have taken place, and I see a lot more strategic initiatives just being, pushed out the door. And so if there was something that I could see more people do, it's just allow space for open to unravel itself at an institution.
thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, that open, when it is presented as the cost-saving measure that it frequently is, it is considered a way to make things more efficient sometimes. And with that in mind, resources aren't, I don't think, put behind open initiatives. For instance, when I tried to do a pilot OER initiative at my university, we had a very kind of reluctant uptake. We had a hard time getting applications because we were trying to add the work of generating an open educational resource or open pedagogy on top of existing responsibilities. Same thing has been happening. There's been a similar experience at Virginia Tech. They are trying to get a pilot off the ground, and they're finding that even with stipends, not having the time or space to devote to the amount of work that comes with this is really kind of, I think, undermining a lot of open initiatives.
Something I really like about this conference so far is the talk, or how people are talking about instructional design, and that exact thing that when you're pushing for the cost savings, people jump on board, and then you get your instructional designers, and you get them to like create all these things or courses and work with faculty and get these things out there, when that's really pushing against trying to get faculty to think about open pedagogy and working in the open, and you need that time, and therefore you have to rethink what that instructional designer's job is. That then it really does start to become that conversation and that collaboration, because there is no template for open pedagogy. So it helps that conversation, but it also it's in opposition to that cost-saving kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, there was just an interesting session by Quill West, I think, and I totally forget which college. I forget all people's names in college.
Pierce College, right?
Pierce College, yeah. So she talked a lot about this. She just got hired, I think, a year ago or so, and the kinds of different pressures that she has as I think she's the lone instructional designer or something like that. Librarian, sorry, but she is doing a lot of open projects. And one of the main things was exactly time. Like it's, you can put whatever money on a project and whatever else, but how people carve out time and care to make their things is vital. And we all, I think we're all excitable people, and everyone I've talked to at this conference is like, yes, open ed, and they're all into everything. But when this is over, we take these back into our normal lives, and we have all the normal, regular things that we have to do, and how do we carve that time out? And so that's been kind of an undercurrent, I think, to many of the conversations or presentations I've seen.
I just wanted to add a little spin to the question. I believe you were asking how the adoption within an institution. And I attended a session by MIT OpenCourseware, and they spent quite a bit of time talking about the outreach to their users. And they approach it really from a social media and marketing standpoint, and thinking of how can we best reach our audience, those that are actually going to access and download the courses. So they're talking about, it got really into very much of a marketing aspect, thinking about what's my hit ratio when I use Facebook versus Twitter, and how can I convert that to emails, and saying that they get their best traction when they get a database of emails. And so I thought I've never heard a session like that here, because we usually we're just throwing our stuff out there and we'll just see what sticks. And they are taking a much more strategic approach to how their materials will be accessed by the end user.
Yeah, I'm also going to try and answer this with hopefully some more practical tips as well. So I should be clear, I work at an institution that has decided to take on this mantle of leadership for open education within my province. But in a sense, this has happened only after a lot of grassroots activity. So without any real tangible support, but importantly, in the absence of active opposition to this, we already exceeded, I think, at something like 100 course adoptions of open textbooks at my institution. That in effect allowed, I think, senior admin to really release some more resources. They've created a position, which I now hold, which is a faculty release position to shepherd open ed initiatives. So small grants programs, workshops over the years, speakers being brought in from elsewhere, membership in the OERU where we're contributing course content. We're really trying now to lead the way with sort of a campus-wide working group. But it's a really interesting conversation to have, because with the administrators, I think the conversation often initially takes the role or takes the shape of discussions about research on those key sort of performance indicators, things like retention, completion, persistence. What is the fiscal impact on the institution? How does this align with the university mission statement mandate? And once those resources are released, then of course that can enable it. So in a sense, it's this odd sort of marriage between grassroots movement and sort of grass top support, but in a way that's ideally not perceived as a top-down initiative. So get the resources, get the support, and then get the administrators to back away so that this can continue to be a grassroots movement. I think the other piece is, the other advantage of broadening the conversation from textbooks and cost savings is that I think often when we are talking about cost savings, that's like faculty may care about this, but this is not a top factor when it comes to adopting required course materials. It is not. In very few cases is it actually. So, and inadvertently when we talk about this, I think we can accidentally strike a bit of a judgmental tone, where we are inadvertently defining people who are not adopting open practices as somehow uncaring, unempathic with their students, or just perhaps really divorced from the reality of their students. So I think instead of accidentally even adopting a tone that can sound judgmental, which focuses on cost savings, I think when we do talk about pedagogical innovation, and I say, I'm not excited by these unsolicited, brown envelopes in my mailbox with a textbook from a commercial publisher. That doesn't excite me when I go to work. But I'm really excited when I hear about some of the work that Jameson's doing, for example. And that's what excites me. So I think that for faculty to really sort of stoke the fires of the grassroots side of things is to continue to focus on how inspirational this movement can be and move away from the sort of guilt-driven or judgmental tone that can sometimes come out.
I'm wondering how important you think it is in terms of stoking that faculty interest for them to have an experience of themselves doing their own research and scholarship in the open, narrating their work, making their own work visible. If they have that experience, it seems to me they'd be much more inclined to consider open pedagogy as a standard practice.
That's a great point, and I think that's actually supported with some of the research that the OER Hub is conducting out of the Open University in the UK. They've conducted quite a bit of survey work, and one aspect that they captured there was how a faculty member just doing their first bit of open work, whatever that would be, a textbook, maybe a touch of their research or engagement with social media, something like this, is I think they used the metaphor of a virus, right? So they were able to see the potential there, and then they had more. In the survey they responded that they were more likely to explore other open options.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pick up on that. I mean, so maybe this is a parallel discussion as well, but I want to get back to the main point as well. It's just, I think we need to be more careful about these metaphors. I'm not a fan of this notion of injecting people with the virus of open, and I'm even less of a fan of this notion of, let's say, open textbooks as the so-called gateway drug. Yeah. These metaphors bother me, not just because they can have very painful personal connections for individuals, but I think that's wrong. It's the wrong framing. It's the wrong metaphor. For me, it's more like unplugging from the matrix in a sense, and sort of realizing how powerful the existing structures are. And the other thing is, when we talk about gateway drugs, openness is about more agency, not less. And I think, again, that's the wrong message.
Right. That allusions to addiction and whatnot are carrying the wrong connotation for sure. That's great.
Sorry, I
didn't say that. I didn't say virus. Mark that from the record.
I'm tweeting this right now. Like, I
It hasn't
can't.
been recorded. I'm sure it hasn't been recorded. And there's, just going back to what you were saying about how really teaching the teachers and using those materials. There's a woman called Chrissy Naranci in the UK who's running, do you know, have you heard of her? She's put together a really interesting open set of resources, but for teaching teachers at higher ed about OER and open, and I think she's interested in expanding those ideas as well. And she has she's moved from one university to another. I can't remember which one she's at now. And it's an open, there's a YouTube channel which anybody can draw from to use those. I think that what she's doing is really great, and she's got I've adapted it. I've taken her template as well to use with teachers at a much lower level, also to teach about open pedagogies and open resources. So that's just something to bear. It's happening, is what I'm trying to say.
Does anybody else want to answer the question that this is coming from in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say, like, I think sometimes we can be prescriptive in how we define like what open pedagogy can be as well, and like, we got to realize that people are going to be coming in at at different points. I mean, I personally love to see everyone blogging everything that they do, but to some people that's almost like giving access to my entire email and bank accounts, like to them, and so I think as if you're an instructional technologist or designer or whatever it is, you have to you can't push all of it at once, and finding ways to bring people in and things that seem that they're interested in is really critical, because it's easy to say you should blog and have a course site and adopt the OER textbook and give us access to your Dropbox and whatever, and people are like, whoa, like that's not me,
Yeah, some of the work I do with faculty is starting just by talking about digital identity and their personal stuff, and like, who are you, and what is your online life, and just starting there, because exactly, they're not gonna teach in an open space if they're not comfortable in that space. So it really is just getting started and just figuring out what it means as a person to be in that place.
Yeah, and I think a great starting point, we would probably mostly agree, is the visitor-resident framework that Dave White and Donna Lanklos work with a lot. When I consult with faculty or other people to open up their projects, one of the first things I do is say, we have to draw out your map to see how much of you is already out there in the open, and then see where you want to move from there, and what parts of your work are out there already and you don't even know it. So, even just starting with like, hey, like, go search engine yourself. I'm not going to say go Google yourself anymore, because Sophia Noble, I saw her last week at Bucknell, and she set me straight. But anyway, so I'm not going to say that anymore. I'm going to say go search yourself or something like that instead of that other word. But yeah, I mean, you really have to find out what parts of yourself are out there, your identity and pieces, and then say, okay, how do I want to include or exclude this from my course? What stance of the open do I want out there? Do I want a blog that's under my name, or do I want to use a pseudonym, and all these different kinds of questions? And I think it's a really complicated or kind of complex thing. And was it the session with Whitney? No, with Kate, where they said, nothing instructional design is best practices. And that was Amy and Sean. So, I think if we look at the Cynefin framework, which I always talk about way too much, there's the obvious and the complicated and the complex and the chaotic, and nothing is obvious with this open stuff, or nothing is, best practices. I think that's kind of really hard to, what's best practice for me, if I could even say that I have one at my college, is totally going to be different on any other college anywhere else in the world. So that's another takeaway.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point, Dan. Thank you. Maha Beli and I, when we conduct this workshop on digital literacies for faculty here, a lot of the things that, the title of the workshop is Promoting Digital Literacies in Teaching. So one of the main things we focus on is getting people to just understand what their digital identity is. And that idea of Googling yourself, I want to say that, sorry, Dan. That idea of just looking at yourself online and finding out who you are and how the world or the digital world sees you is very important, but also thinking about how much of the world you want, like how much of yourself you want to show the world, basically, and just thinking about your digital footprint. And like just yesterday, we were just talking to an online communications professor about this, and she was thinking of conducting a lot of these online activities in her course, and she was just really worried about her students, and she was just saying, oh, how much of it should be online, how much should be public, how much should be private, and I don't know how students are going to take this. And the first thing I told her was, you just have to understand how it is for yourself and who you are online and your own digital identity and how comfortable you are teaching online, and then transfer that to your students, and then or go and ask them how comfortable they are being online, and then sort of level that playground between you and them.
Excuse me, I just wanted to mention before we kind of move away from the adoption, faculty adoption, we've mentioned a couple times Quill West presented, and it gets to something you mentioned as well. We've kind of gotten away from this idea of the excitement of it and the enthusiasm, and I think that Quill's excitement about the space is so infectious. And so it goes back to the fear of missing out. You know, if you can find those advocates within your university, which we tend to, I've noticed in several conferences, try to codify this adoption. You know, how can I layer things up as though there's like some chart out there that if we all follow it, people will adopt. And so much of this is just basic change, and it's you find the leaders who take the initiative, and they're doing cool things, and people want to be part of that movement. And I don't know, it just seems like a lot of the really successful programs have started with kind of that benevolent dictator, I guess, if you want to say, you know, somebody that's out there that this is what's going to happen and it's going to be fun and join on, you know, rather than making it, oh my gosh, this is just another thing. I have to now, you know, put a Creative Commons license on everything. You know, it just becomes a thing you got to do every day versus something you want to do organically.
Well, and thinking about, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to mention that I know that there's been comments that I just realized that there's a chat and that we've been studiously ignoring the chat comments. But I'm going to try and keep an eye in case any.
No, we know you guys can see it from that far, so don't worry about it. If there's something that comes up and Helen or we catch it, we usually let you guys know. But I want Helen, I don't know, I want either one of us to just copy all of the links that we're sharing here and share it with everybody else so that we don't lose it after we stop the Hangout. Awesome, thank you.
To come back to some of the comments that Jennifer and Mandy were making, and really a comment that Rajiv made in the beginning, you know, we're talking a lot about how we work with faculty, but in this idea of advocates and helping students and, you know, being leaders in this field, where have you heard in this conference the student voice? Have people brought that in, or how have you brought that in your own work?
I'm leading a student panel tomorrow, and I don't know anyone else is doing it, and I will make that clear. That's all I'd say. Mic drop. Well, I mean, but it's a point that it wasn't one that I wanted to make, but the conference has elicited it from me. That's like I want to make it very apparent, and like you know, dial myself back from it and just let students talk. And I was about to have lunch with one of the students that's here, an undergraduate student at Georgetown University, and she like looks at me and she goes, "Are there any other like undergraduates here?" Like almost like afraid, you know, like, is there anybody here? And like totally caught her off guard that you know, that there's not, you know, that we, you know, she's talking about, you know, I got accepted for this, but we don't have funds, you know, for conference presentations. She's luckily in driving distance, and luckily had a roommate who has a car because she doesn't have a car on campus and didn't know where to stay, and like, you know, someone's letting her stay with her, and David comped her. But like these stuff don't exist in some kind of formal way to make it easier for students to participate in our conversations. And then people aren't submitting with students.
Right.
Also.
Yeah. Well, and Diane Ryan from Tidewater Community College brought a student panel that was on this morning about student experiences with the Z degree program over there. And I didn't catch the entire session, but the parts I did catch felt a little bit like these students were there to parade their positive experiences with OER. It felt a little bit glossy, but I think there's lots of reasons for that. But nonetheless, these students were communicating how important and impactful these OER were for their experiences and how much they want this to absolutely be the norm. And the room was absolutely, locked in, really wanting to hear these voices. So yeah, I think there's a thirst for the student perspective.
You got me worked up, Lindsay.
We're really excited to hear all about that, Adam. So if you want to let us know how it went afterwards, or anybody can just like tweet us.
Talk to them. Talk to the students.
How?
It'd be great to have them do a virtual connecting. We should make that.
That would be great. I'll talk to Mel about this and see if we can schedule something tomorrow after their session.
Or find someone to periscope the session if they're comfortable with that.
Sure.
I think I don't want to be ruining or closing or ending the conversation whatsoever. I just want to make everybody know that they can tell us that they need to go whenever, just feel comfortable. We're 5 minutes past the time that we were supposed to end, so you guys are welcome to hang around.
There's another session as well.
Exactly.
You all.
Virtually connecting, yes, but we just found out that we can run 2 sessions at the same time, so still okay.
Right. But
You guys are having lunch now, though, so
Yeah.
time to close it up. if everyone's
okay. I'm gonna stop broadcasting. Thank you so much for joining us for Virtually Connecting today at Open Ed 16, and we're looking forward to the next session with Mahan Boni. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Can we,
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.